Hey everybody, this is Loves from Timeless Guardians with the literal quick learn to play guide for King's Rest. This was a +7 run, so in addition to the normal mechanics, there's the modifier Exploding, which I'll cover briefly, so bear with me. The first mobs you meet at the bottom of the stairs have a cone effect called Suppression Slam. It's pretty easy to see, pretty easy to dodge, but if you do get hit, it just causes a couple seconds stun and a decent amount of damage. The little guys around the corner will fixate on random members of the party. If they touch you, you get feared. AoE them down, and it's not a big problem. They do show up later in the dungeon. These guys have the exact same ability as the first mob you dealt with. I just wanted to add this clip to show that ranged and heals can stay outside of the cone effect without risking getting hit. Once you activate the first boss, 5 packs of mobs will spawn. 4 that you can see, 1 that pats around. These are the Exploding modifier. DPS needs to get them down as quick as possible. If they go off, they cause a lot of AoE damage. Now, this is our preferred area to tank the mobs because of the patch you can't see coming around that can cause problems in a second. They have the same effect as the beginning. All you have to do is AoE them down. If you get touched, the fear could send you into the mobs in the back and cause a lot of trouble. The caster on your tank has an ability called Shadow Bolt Volley you really should interrupt. The big guy with the shield is not too much of an issue. The next set of mobs has an ability called Gale Slash. All it does is knocks you back a small distance, interrupts casting, and causes a little bit of damage. If you get hit by it, it's not going to be a critical issue. Once you get all the mobs in the room down, the boss spawns almost immediately. One of the main abilities you have to keep an eye on is Spit Gold. He targets a member of the party with an ability that when it expires, drops a pool of gold on the floor underneath them. Next is Serpentine Gust. Just run away from it. The boss will cycle through the same 2 abilities for the majority of the fight. Not a lot to pay attention to other than who has Spit Gold and Serpentine Gust. It's best for range to stay on the altar because after 3 people are affected by Spit Gold and 3 pools have been spawned, they actually turn into a different ad called Animated Glob. Range needs to burn these as quick as possible because if they actually reach the boss, they give him a shield that makes them almost impossible to kill after a certain amount of stacks. Next is a Time Burner event. 4 packs of mobs activate one after the other around the room. You just have to make sure you follow your 3 major rules of World of Warcraft. Stay out of the purple, stay out of the green, stay out of the spinny. The only effect you need to worry about during this event is Seduction. It's an MC, and if it targets your highest DPS, it could really be a problem for you. After the event, you come across 1 mob on a bridge. He has 2 abilities, the first being Purification Strike. Just have the tank pull him to one side of the bridge and you'll be fine. The next is Purification Beam. It's just a 360 beam, doesn't do a lot of damage, healer should be fine getting you through it. Next set of mobs leading up to this boss can get a little sketchy if you're not paying attention. The slimes throw a gas that has an AoE slow effect, and as they move they leave a trail that can cause a lot of damage. The big guys on either end of the room aren't hard to deal with. While they look like the guy on the bridge, they only have 1 major ability, Entomb. It targets 1 member of the party and puts them in a sarcophagus, usually directly next to the mob. If you get got, start smashing your 1 key so the sarcophagus shakes and your team knows where to find you. If you just open them randomly, your entire party takes a lot of AoE damage. The boss himself is very straightforward in the fight with only 3 abilities, the first of which being Burn Corruption. Run away, and don't stand in the fire once it spawns. Next is Drain Fluids. It's just a channel damage effect, it's nothing crazy. Lastly is Entomb. The same rules as the previous mob. Once he puts you in a sarcophagus, start smashing 1 so your party can find you. Don't start randomly opening them because you will take a lot of damage. Next few sets of mobs are very straightforward. Watch out for Ground Crush, Hunting Leap from the Raptors, and Bloodied Leap from the Warriors. The next fight has 3 phases with 3 different bosses that can spawn in a random order, one after the other. Kula the Butcher uses Whirling Axes. She throws 2 axes out in a radius that keep expanding as the fight goes on. The best option is to stack in the middle as much as possible so you're not running around for no reason. Each new boss comes in with a new ability in addition to the ability of the previous boss you just killed. The ability the party needs to watch out for here is Barrel Through. It's marked with a red arrow above a character's head. Everyone needs to get in a line with the character that's marked at the back of that line. Next is a knockback effect called Debilitating Backhand on the tank. Now for the rest of the encounter, the previous bosses will spawn randomly and cast their special ability. The abilities can stack and make things a bit more complicated as the fight goes on. This boss has 2 abilities, the first of which being Poison Nova, which is interruptible, and should be interrupted to bring him to the middle of the room to make it easier for the tank to avoid the whirling axes. Next is Call of the Elements. 4 totems spawn with different effects or abilities. Explosive Totem is to be your first to focus down, because when it explodes, it causes nearly fatal damage to the entire group. While you're working to get the rest of the totems down, don't forget that Barrel Through, Poison Nova, and Whirling Axes are still on the field, so you have to pay attention. The last mob before the final boss has 2 abilities, but only one worth noting. Someone needs to go into this pool and soak it to avoid a lot of AoE damage to the group. The final boss uses the abilities Gale Slash, which sends a small tornado out you need to avoid, and Quaking Leap, which you just need to get away from the rest of the party. As the second phase begins, a raptor spawns. He does a mild amount of damage, and he's tauntable, so the tank should easily be able to pick him up. He uses the same ability, Hunting Leap, as the raptors in the previous area. Leave the frontal cone and you should be perfectly fine. It's preferred to burn the raptor as quick as possible just to avoid the extra damage, but it's not really necessary. For the third phase, King Dazar actually mounts a raptor. All damage done to the boss is actually diverted to Tazala. It's essentially adding a shield to the boss and adding the ability Deathly Roar. It's a 2-second fear that affects everybody in the party. The last thing you have to worry about is the ability called Impaling Spear. Just get out of the swirling spots on the ground and you should be perfectly fine. The mechanics for the fight are all exactly the same, whether you're doing a 2 or a 20. You can't just burst damage your way through like a regular heroic. If you're not planning on paying attention, you could waste somebody's key and their time. With that being said, don't be afraid to do mythics and don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a great way to get gear if you're not in a raiding guild, and it's also a great way to make friends within the guild. Again, this is Loves with Timeless Guardians. Thank you again for sticking around if you made it to the end. I really appreciate it, and I hope this helps somebody somewhere.